right, so as you can tell, it's a packed panel this morning, but that's good because it means that the insights that we might be able to draw for this particular event will help us in as far as what needs to be done to get Gauteng on the right trajectory. Dr. Lekgotla, I'm going to begin with you. And you, of course, are not known as somebody who minces his words or even holds back. I take it you've had an opportunity to look at this comprehensive plan that has been delivered here today. From an execution point of view, if at a very high level, and I'm going to ask all our panelists, please, to try and keep the answers as succinct as possible. I know it's a little bit contradictory, right? I want your insights, but I also want you to keep it short. But if we can, please, if we review what the potential risks then are of implementing this plan, where do you think it may fall short?
No, thank you very much, Mekas. Yeah, I think there are a lot of positives. I haven't seen a plan like this in years in South Africa. There was one G2030 by Growing Gauteng Together by Premier Makura, more or less similar to this. In fact, it was informed on the same basis. But the national government didn't come to the party, and that plan collapsed. We face probably the same kind of risk. If the national government doesn't come to the party, we cannot expect miracles on this plan. There is another critical risk, and that critical risk emerged out of the Statistician General's Quarter Labor Force Survey. I've been doing some work, and in the work that I did, I came to a ratio of 1:1. The employed, it's 17.1 million. The unemployed, or rather the not economically active, are also 1.1 million. When I went lower to where this is occurring, this is the space where democracy has collapsed. And that collapse of democracy consists of a 38% and a 28% of the population. So all in all, 66% in the country. The archetypes of those is where democracy has collapsed. It leaves only 34% of a wealth lock. Now, we really have to deal with that space where democracy has collapsed, because if it collapses, it just collapsed already. If we go to the local government elections with that kind of space, then we are going to have a landlord, landlords running the country, because people are not going to vote. Mm-hmm. We cannot have that democracy risked. And this plan has to be such that it communicates the message long before the election, because it will fail when democracy has collapsed. And it's in 68 areas. And I can point to those areas at the level of small areas.
Professor Bowman, what Mr. Lekgotla is raising is really important, because ultimately he's saying that the policy must be such that once implemented, it speaks and addresses the realities of where this country finds itself in this moment. Having worked on the model that is underpinning this plan, do you believe that it's going to be able to do that in as far as the results that it produces? Because that's what the Statistician General is saying. He's saying the results must be that they deal with those that have lost hope, lost trust in our democratic system, because things are simply not working as they should.
Yes, ultimately taking any plan and making it a reality is up to all of us. Right? And adding to what was just said is, take the NDP, which was launched to much fanfare 15 years ago. We had very ambitious targets. Looking back, it was perhaps much more an aspirational plan than one rooted in reality. And what we see is, or what was perhaps neglected back then is, you don't get to set jobs, right? You don't get to set growth. You get to set the conditions under which they can occur as government, right? And so if you want to suddenly set a target of 5% export growth, right? You've got to make sure your ports are working. You've got to make sure you are competitive. You've got to make sure your cost of doing business is as low as possible, right? And that's where the magic happens, right? And I'm very happy to say, having worked on this plan and done a lot of modeling, a lot of those bottlenecks are at least on the plan being addressed. But of course, it's all about execution, right? And execution is up to all of us, right? A while ago, we were at a place, and one of the last questions was, what are you going to do individually, right, to make sure we become a better place, right? And it starts from stop at the stop street, right? We must take individual responsibility along with the collective that government is trying to provide. And it is ultimately up to all of us. We can't just look at government. I think what is very encouraging is I think we're seeing much more of private partnerships getting the right attention at the right level. Government realizes they can't do all of it on its own, nor should they. The private sector realizes they can't just complain and try and do this, and they need government. We need each other, right? It's a team effort to get us from A to B. We'll hear about the issues from the business chamber, what actually is going on the ground, what do we need to fix. But it's doable, right? And what HUD Mahoa's results was emphasizing is there's a heck of a difference between getting this right properly and kind of just plodding along, right? And if you translate that into lives and quality of those lives, you know, it almost makes us grow that responsibility to make sure we get it right.
I want to go a little bit deeper into something that you've mentioned, and it's around the environment and the ecosystem that is created, which enables growth, which enables the creation of jobs. Many of those factors that you have touched on, whether we're looking at the state of transport, what is happening at the ports, what is happening with Transnet and Eskom, those are not necessarily in the hands of the Gauteng government, provincial government, to change or to do anything about necessarily. Yes, they can influence, but what does that mean for a plan like this? What are the assumptions that have been made that will very much then have a bearing on what is achievable and what is not?
100%, right? I think provincial government to some extent is a very important middle manager, right? They sit between local, where a lot of it gets executed, and national, where a lot of the big plans come from, right? So it's an extremely important role, but it's yet sometimes I'm sure they must be feeling like they're fighting with one hand tied behind their backs, right? And so coordination between levels of government, this has been mentioned, is crucial. We can't individually, a department here, provincial there, local there, solve all of these problems, right? So I think, again, we're seeing more of this. That level of coordination is improving. I think we've learned a lot of lessons over the last decade or two, but it is essential now that we step on it and we execute, right? The plans are there, the plans are good. We now need to make sure that each party in this massive, it's a massive exercise, right? I mean, if you go through those pillars and who and what is involved, we're talking about the entire country and beyond, right? So this is no easy feat pulling this off, but the stakes are too high for us not to. And coordination is crucial, and our leaders in the room, you know, that's their job, right, is to help all of us achieve that job a little bit easier because the right things are in place.
Yanda, it's a very difficult balancing act. You know, they often say that where you have lots of priorities, then it means that nothing is a priority. And there are contending interests, and there are also contending needs. What do you think Gauteng needs to do in order to be clear about what it's prioritizing from a policy execution point of view? And to what level does that conversation also need to go beyond just what is happening in the province, in the country, to actually elevating it to looking at the continent, because South Africa still very much has to be seen as the gateway to Africa, and Gauteng must be that economic hub.
It's important for Gauteng government to accelerate its plans on infrastructure, especially on energy security, logistics corridors, digital infrastructure. Gauteng must do this working with private sector. Both the Premier and the MEC mentioned the Gauteng. You know, we've seen Gauteng doing this. They've done this working on the Gauteng projects, whereby they've done initial infrastructure development for 26. It's now worth 56 billion rands. It's something that Gauteng knows how to do and has done it before, and we must focus on those infrastructure projects. The other thing that Gauteng needs to do and focus on, prioritize, is governance. It's important that we focus on improving governance, transparency, and regulatory efficiency to enhance investor confidence and ensure rapid delivery of these projects. Keith, you know, I once worked with APRM. They were looking at the challenges that Africa had in terms of what are the stumbling blocks in terms of economic growth, sustainable development, and political stability. One of the main things is governance. Gauteng needs to focus on governance and prioritize governance. Because if you don't, then everyone does their own thing. Nothing moves as it should. So we have to really look at governance and focus on that. And then also we need to strengthen education. I've had both the HOD and the Premier spoke about it. Strengthening education, skills development, healthcare, transport systems. We need to strengthen those. I know at times whenever there's enough money, we cut on those. If you look at the failures in Africa, if you look at the failures in South America, in Asia, it started with cutting on education, on healthcare infrastructure. Once you cut those, you're going to turn with the growth, into economic growth. So Gauteng needs to do the opposite and strengthen those priorities. Then, you know, in terms of aligning ourselves with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, Gauteng needs to develop an export-oriented industrial policy targeting African markets. I'm glad that MEC said that we're not just looking at Gauteng only when we want to focus on Africa. We're looking at the regions around Gauteng so that we can able to service the whole of Africa. So we need to develop these export-oriented industry policies targeting African markets. We need to harmonize provincial laws and regulations with the Africa Free Trade Area requirements, including tariff schedules, custom procedures, standards, measures, investment, and competition frameworks. Gauteng also needs to invest in trade facilitation. What do I mean by that? I mean customs, ITC systems, I mean standards harmonization, logistics efficiency, in order to integrate Gauteng firms into regional value chains. Then lastly, we need to strengthen, if it's not there, I haven't seen it, we need to strengthen the African Free Trade Area coordination mechanism. So Gauteng needs to have a mechanism that will speak to the African Free Trade Area so that it links provincial departments, customs authorities, and private sector with the rest of Africa to do proper trading.
Yanda, I mean, there's quite a lot that you've packed in there, and just hearing it, one thinks about how intensive it is, right, to actually execute that. To what extent do you believe that there is enough coordination currently in order? It doesn't happen on its own, I guess is what I'm saying. It needs in intentionality. What needs to be brought in to enable all of that?
Right, Kathy. I think Gauteng needs to be more intentional, that we need to build this mechanism. You know, I'm not sure, I've not seen them, I'm not sure if they're there already, but we need to sit down and build them, make sure they're in line with what we want to do. We need to understand the risks that are out there. I've not heard much about if we want to do trade in Africa, what risks do we have in there? For an example, I'll give you an example. Risk in North Africa are different to the risk in West Africa, different to the risk in East Africa, different to the risk in Southern Africa. These are all of different dynamics. And we need to sit down and pack these risks and understand them and put this mechanism so that when we do trade, when we work with African countries, we understand this, we are able to work properly.
Okay. Neil, You represent business. You're the Vice President of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So, sitting and being part of a briefing like this, what are you wanting to hear, Neil, that you can take back to your constituency that says we have a reason to have confidence in Gauteng?
So you must know, sometimes I need to take a bit of a route to get to the question that you've asked. Just look at the people in the room today and look at the stats that were said. And we started off with the editor of the Business Day saying recently, we don't need less people getting in the way, we need more people showing up, which I think is extremely powerful. Then our Premier stood up and spoke about the truth about our province. We're not failed, we are amazing, and we don't realize actually how amazing we are. Less than 1% of the Africa's population generates it's the sixth most powerful economy on the continent. That's not failure. That is unbelievable. Just think about it. Less than 1% of the population of Africa has the sixth largest economy of Africa. We know as well that Gauteng is already the gateway for Africa business. And the data comes through from OR Tambo. Not one, not two, we're talking about millions of business people visit the province every single year. Gauteng is really a rock star, but we beat ourselves up. And why do we beat ourselves up? We have the best schools. Any of our schools could compete anywhere in the world, but we've got the worst schools as well. South Africa's got 750,000 kilometers of roads. It's one of the biggest road networks, but we've got potholes. You've got the Donnie Gordon Institute that people from around the world fly to live, not to come and die. But we have clinics that when you go into them, unfortunately, you know you're coming to the end of your life. We have this duality of absolutely world-leading. I was at an event for G20 where Prime Minister was signing an MOU with 5 of our defense companies to come and help them look after their country's defense. The Prime Minister of Brazil said that South Africa has got a great defense industry, but nobody talks about it. We have these lights that are amazing, and what do we do with our words? We put buckets over the top of it. But today is a very good example of how poorly business is integrated into Gauteng. Can I ask, is there any CEO in this room today that's on a JSE-listed company? Is there a CEO of a JSE-listed company in the room today? So how can the plan of Gauteng survive if the CEOs of listed companies aren't in the room? And that's one of the problems, is that we often focus at the small sections. We talk about our township economies, we talk about SMEs, which are hugely important, but how can they survive if the elephants are not in the room? Because you need the elephants to create these structures, and then the medium-sized companies will feed into them, and then you create space for the small companies. I was in a very, very embarrassing situation recently where I was speaking to a listed company's CFO, and she said to me, we don't need Saki, because we're so powerful that we can speak to anybody that we want to. And the thing is, she was right. She could speak to anybody that she could. But the thing that she forgot was that because they are powerful, they should be speaking into the world of business. And we've created this duality of these ginormous companies. We do. Is anybody worried about the South African banking institution? Nobody's worried about our banks because we have the best run banks in the world. If you look at insurance, if you look at pharmaceutical, if you look at agriculture, if you look at all those factors that were mentioned a little bit earlier, we have the best of the best in that space, but we do not reach out to the big companies to be here. And that's what I find extremely sad, is that I go to many events where there are small SMEs showing up and their language has changed. Language used to be, what can you give me? And their language is changing to, this is what I'm doing, how can I participate? And we see thousands of small businesses changing into that space. I'm very fortunate that I've been to many townships. I mean, I've had a meal inside a rubbish dump, that the space where I was having a meal was unbelievably clean and tidy. So we don't realize that we have poor people that actually run their spaces. I've actually been in a space that a community, 26,000 people live off a rubbish dump. And I can tell you, if I left my cell phone on a table, nobody would steal it. Because that's a community that's developed, that understood the space. So we've got spaces that we can trust. We know that safety is an issue, but the safety is everywhere issue. But to come back to it is that we need to understand, we should talk about the plan. Everybody in Gauteng should talk about the plan, because then we can all participate. When we say the Gauteng City Regional Economic Growth and Development Plan, it is too complicated, but if we're all participating in the plan, we can. We need government. Gauteng has shown it's created a world-leading plan. So you've seen many, and I think we've all seen many. It is the correct plan. So we've got government, we've got the province on board. If you speak to our 5 cities, they're on board as well. So government's in place. Business needs to show up, and small business is showing up. We need to get big business in place so that communities can participate.
And Neil, I don't want us to also avoid the reality of, it may not be overt, but there certainly is a sense of a tension that often exists between big business and government. And there are multiple reasons that lead to that. And as somebody then who heads up an economic chamber, what are the solutions that you think, or the insights that you can offer around how to manage and navigate that tension? Because often what you find is everybody wants to come around the table, they want to have their way, and very few concessions being made. But how do we move beyond that? Because I think that could well be a contributing factor to why we find ourselves in the situation that we're in, not only as a province, but I think as a country overall.
It's a brilliant question. Because what do we need to do that? And I think the solution's simpler than what we think, is that the Premier needs to say, what are the top 20 companies in Gauteng? And I'm going to set up personal one-on-one meetings with each of those CEOs. And then we need the media to say that the Premier has reached out to these 20 companies, and these 4 or these 5 CEOs didn't pitch up. Why didn't they? Our Premier needs to understand what business needs. And big business needs to feel that they're speaking to the right level. Then our medium-sized companies, each city needs to decide, do they need to understand their top 200, the top 100, or the top 50 companies that are in their region, in their city. And then let the management, the MMCs, the directors of those cities get to know those listed companies. And we need to know who they are. We need to know who those medium-sized. And then every single region in our province has somebody that has been nominated to represent that region. And that town councillor needs to know who are their businesses and speak to the businesses. But not about, I need this from you and you need to do this. It's let's talk with each other. Let us understand what each other's problems are. Let us get to know each other. And then we start sorting out problems. We know in a family, if a family member's in trouble and they don't tell us what's going on, we can't sort it out. But every single one of us got an example where a family member has said, this is my problem, and what does the family do? They sort it out. So, does our Premier know who the top 20 companies are? Do our city managers know who their top 100 to top 200 are? And do our councillors know who are their businesses in their areas? Let us come together in conversation, and you'll find that 5% that we want to achieve, we'll go right past that.
Okay. Thando Letu, you are a CEO and founder of Synaptics, an entrepreneur. So you're among the businesses, the small, medium enterprises that are in the room. When you look at this plan and you think about the opportunities that it creates for your community, what would you say are some of the low-hanging fruit, maybe just two, that have stood out for you?
So speaking into the plan and some of the things that the plan addressed, one of them was funding for the entrepreneurs and the small businesses that are coming into the space. With that plan, it's a very great initiative. I'm one of the beneficiaries of the GDED. I got funding to build the MVP of my project. But one of the things that I identified as a gap in the funding component is that you will get funding to build the product. And then from there, the following sector or category that you get is Series A funding. Series A funding starts from 10 million plus. You need to already be an established business by the time you get to that point. From building an MVP and to a point where you get to be eligible for the 10 million, there is a gap in between because you can only get up to 2 million with the MVP. You build it, but now the gap is when you have to sort of go out there and pilot a solution and get like people to buy into it, you face a challenge that people don't know you because you've just started. You've been recognized, oh, this is a viable product, you can build the MVP. But then that gap it sort of comes in at that point because now you can't sort of prove the concept because people you are preaching to and you're trying to introduce the solution to, they don't really trust that you know what you're doing because you don't have proof of concept. But you need funding to get proof of concept with the pilot to go into the market. So that's just one of the challenges that I think we face as entrepreneurs. And another one would be market access itself. Because I'm in the ICT space, so you know how to build software. Okay, you're solving solutions that you know would see these are solutions that we need in the space that we're in. These are problems that people face, and this is the solution we can use. We can use ICT to build the solution. Now, the challenge with accessing the market, it's almost the same thing. The market wants to work with people that they know are established and they have proven concepts. When we get funding to build the concept, the MVP is built, like the GDED funds the incubation hubs that help us to build these solutions. But my skill is in software development. I don't know how to market the product that I've built. So that also becomes one of the issues because how do I then get this product that I have built in my corner with my computer? How do I get it out there and get people to adopt it? So I think that the plan also speaks about the non-financial support that the organization, the Economic Development Plan will address, but it doesn't really elaborate on the kind of support that it is. So I think things like marketing and having support for how do I build the different departments in my organization would be beneficial to also include in the plan.
It sounds like part of what is needed, Thandolwethu, is almost a bridge for entrepreneurs like yourself and organizations like Neil. Because Neil is sitting with all of the business, you have all of the ideas, and how do we ensure that that connection is a lot more effortless and seamless, right? That you need clear pathways that are deliberately crafted and shaped for you once you're done with the hard work of being innovative and coming up with solutions.
Yes, exactly. I think I'll have a conversation with you after that.
Did I just open the door there? Wonderful. Mamelo, you're with the Youth Advisory Council, and we know of the many challenges that startups face, and I think Thandolwethu, just in that short snippet, has given us a very accurate picture of what the journey sometimes can be. How else do you think that the ecosystem can be strengthened for entrepreneurs? And I want you to tackle the question in two ways, because on the one hand, there are those entrepreneurs that are able to get into the system. By that I mean they get a program that can support them, they're funded for one thing or the other, they're given skills, so that in many ways is a leg up. But then there are also those entrepreneurs who are not able to get into any program, who are not adopted by anyone. They have to do what the majority of entrepreneurs in this country do, which is hustle their way.
I
I think what Thandolotho is saying is very important. One thing that the provincial government can do is expand the youth-targeted funding and the blended finance models that makes it easier for our young people to access the startup capital. While doing that, we should also expand on the innovative hubs that are already in place from the GDED. We should also ensure that the incubators in the township areas are part of the innovation ecosystems that are not limited to urban district areas, but reach communities where young people actually live and work. And this, if we unlock that at scale, township economies can become powerful engines of inclusive growth and job creation.
What is not working with the current module? Because there is no shortage of organizations that the province will point you to if you're an SMME that needs support. There's a whole list of entities that you will be given, but what is not working with the current system?
I think the problem is that it's always consultations. And now we need to include these young people in the co-implementation of these plans and models that are put in place. Young people are there, include them, make them part of decision-making processes, and make them the actual drivers of such plans. Not only consult them on what they need, you find out what they need, and yet you go back to your office and not include them in the implementation of this.
What does that inclusion look like? And I'm talking here really practical things that the province can look at and say, this is what we need to do to better show up for the young people in the province and to make sure that they're part of the conversation.
I think, firstly, there should be a scaling of youth-focused interventions across the medium-term expenditure framework. Skills development, internships, and enterprise support initiatives should move from thousands to tens of thousands annually, with clear targets across municipalities to ensure spatial equity. Also, institutionalize youth participation in the implementation and monitoring. The plan has already identified monitoring and evaluation processes, but in this regard, use platforms such as the Gauteng Youth Advisory Panel, make them key stakeholders or key partners in implementation and ensuring that you resource them, you also give them the kind of responsibilities that they would need to ensure that monitoring takes place so that we can also hold government accountable for the young people that we represent.
In a moment, I'm going to be opening the session up to our delegates in the room. Looking at the time, I think we might be able to take 3 questions from the room and 3 questions online. If I can just have the roving microphones standing by, please. But before I do that, Ntatelo Khotla, just one thing on the institutional mechanisms and the need for reform. Younger emphasized, the fact that governance is a big issue. Often when we think governance, of course, there's corruption that takes the headline. But from what I was hearing him say, there's a lot that sits under there that then is neglected and is not attended to. How do we ensure that we don't get to a point of fatigue around policies and announcements and pronouncements? Because there will be plans to have plans. How do we move beyond that?
And I thank you very much, Mbekasi. I think that one of the things is that we have to think impact. And the Premier and the Minister Maile have spoken about that. And impact is about Zone 7 in Mamelodi. Do our instruments reflect that? Does the BEE that somebody gets a mine in Mokhalakwena, which is connected to Johannesburg, is there impact in the people in Mokhalakwena? What are the mechanisms? Does the BEE, benefit the person who holds the BEE, or does it have an impact in the villages in which we work? When I spoke about the collapse of democracy, we really have to make impact on Zone 7, on Sebokeng Zones 2, and we need those mechanisms. And there you need really refined data to do that. Fortunately, I must say, in the work I've been doing in Stats SA, I've created a platform where impact has to be visible based on the promises that government or the business promise. And that mechanism can realize impact on a grand scale at a refined level. That way, we can resuscitate the essence of democracy, we can resuscitate the essence of our competitiveness as a country and rebuild as we move into the continent. And that impact is also necessary in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Some of the data holdings that we have that should inform after is ignored by the AU, by the UNECA. We have a product called International Comparisons Program that I ran with other statistics offices. What does it tell us? It tells us what to produce and what to consume. And that is a strategy for telling us what is our strategy for industrialization. That data is ignored, completely ignored. And we need to bring that data at the center of our discussions now, as South Africa, as Africa, because when we talk about Africa Continental Free Trade, we've got to dissolve the border in Musina and make it an industrial hub. We have to dissolve so many other borders that are a creation and artifact that doesn't relate to economic activities. So what am I talking about? It must be data-driven, and it must be at the lowest level of geography. Then when we do that, we know it will be inclusive, and it will succeed.
Yanda, you want to have a quick bite?
Yeah, I just want to touch on what both Professor Dr. Pali and Neil said about showing up and being ignored. Premier has to show up. Premier and his MECs and stuff. They need to show up constantly. They need to show up in various diplomatic functions. I attend a lot of these diplomatic functions and stuff. I hardly see the Gauteng government, hardly. There's another province that I don't want to mention that's far. They come all the way to Pretoria to attend these and engage. You don't see Gauteng government engaging. And if they don't engage, they're not going to be able to level the playing grounds for business thrive. They're not going to be able to address the issues because they're busy talking among themselves. You need to go out there and engage, so many times up until you get it right. I just wanted to add those three issues.
All right. Thanks for that insight. Okay. Let me see my hands across the room. Yes, sir. 1. Yes, ma'am. 2. Do I have a third hand in the room? Okay. I don't see any. Yes, sir. We'll start with you.
Good morning. Good morning to everybody. My name is Claiborne Appis, and I represent an organization called Deaf Touch. Our core focus is inclusivity. And when we talk inclusivity, unfortunately in this room today, our disabled community is not represented. So respectfully, the most vulnerable person to me is the black female who's disabled. Simply because she doesn't even get to sit in these rooms, never mind be represented in the data that we talk about, that we need in order to facilitate that inclusive growth. So I think where democracy has failed, the most vulnerable, how do we truly ensure that inclusive growth is not this, famous word that we're using, and make sure that no one truly is left behind, because democracy was meant to ensure that everyone is truly included and we do move forward.
That is such an important point that you have raised, sir, and thank you for calling it out. I don't think that it's necessarily calling the room out, but even calling the country out, because we certainly do not do any justice to some of our communities, particularly those living with disabilities. So thank you for that contribution, and I'll get the panel to respond shortly. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, panelists and everyone in the room. My name is Sarah Mabucha. I'm the MMC for Economic Development and Special Planning in the capital city. I just want to relate my question to Mr. Pollock. Mr. Pollock is our new TIDA board members. I think, he's the right person to be in the panel. So my question to him is that, seeing that we do have a Tshwane economic revitalization strategy, and the strategy is aiming to create a 3.6% in terms of the growth in the capital city, and also want to create close to 80,000 jobs, and we want to our investment value to be between 16 and 27 billion rand in the next 5 years. So, Mr. Pollock, my question to you is that since you are the new board member, how are we going to make sure that we do align what is being said or proposed here in terms of our Tshwane economic revitalization strategy? And Mr. Padiri was talking about the issue of the impact. How are we going to make sure that Tshwane is no longer the same Tshwane that we do know? Because as I always say, that Tshwane is rising and Tshwane is open for business, and we want all the investors in the room to come to Tshwane because we are created a very conducive environment for investments. For example, what we do, Dr. Pai was talking about the issue of the VIP investment. So we do have 200 VIP business that we did identify. In that 200, we are saying that if anyone wants to come to Tshwane and start business there, they don't have to queue in terms of, what your municipal services or anything that you do need. So some of the incentives that we are giving to the investors out there to come to Tshwane. Same thing applies to the issue of the rates. If you want to construct, maybe, for example, in Roslyn, I can see Dr. Zulu is here from Tazes. We say we can be able to waive or give a breather for 2 or 3 years so that you can be able to start your business before you can be able to pay the actual property. So some of the things, the initiatives that we are bringing in Tshwane to say that we want people to come invest in Tshwane so that we can be able to create more jobs and we'll be able to grow our economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, MEC. There was some upselling, some cross-selling, some wonderful. Love it. Let's get the final question from the floor.
And I have just 2 questions. Having listened to the beautiful plan and the amazing projections, if we get this and that right, here are my 2 questions. They may not be, maybe someone else might be more relevant to answer them than the panel. When we say we need government, we all agree we need government. We need one another. Government needs the private sector, we need government. The question is, what caliber of government do we need? We all agree we need government. I mean, there's no dispute about that. But what caliber of government do we need, actually, to make these things happen? That's my first question. My second question, Madam Program Director, I live north of here, not very far from here. For the past 2 days, we haven't had water. And my question is, what level of performance would we achieve if we just got the basics right? It's okay to say, if we get this, high level this, high level that, this is what we would get. But if we just got the basics right, I'm in tourism. If I got water to operate, if I got the right road infrastructure to operate, if I got refuse removal, I live in an area north of here where refuse has not been collected for 2 days. No water for 2 days, no refuse collection for 2 days. If we just get the basics of getting energy so that businesses, big, small, and medium, can operate. If we got those basics right, what would we achieve in terms of the growth of this great economy and the contribution to GDP? Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Makasi, I think, I've been in government for 17 years. I saw the plan for growing Gauteng together that was designed in 2020 by Premier Makura. And I made the point that the national government didn't come to the party. And I'm making the point again, if it doesn't come to the party, this plan is not going to work. But this plan is so detailed, and it needs the support of business in Gauteng, not only in Gauteng, but the country itself. Because it's so crucial that with collapsed democracy at the moment, past the local government election, this country will go to the dogs if we do not follow this plan. I've looked at it, I've critiqued it. It holds the best promise. Yesterday I was with DID, Department of Infrastructure Development, and the convergence of the leadership here says to me there is promise. But we need business to be in the center. But we need monitoring and evaluation almost real time to deal with issues of water and sanitation. And it must be done at the local level where the water is leaking. It must be digitized so that there's reaction real time. We need that smart, the tools of sensing are available now. And we can sense things immediately and we must respond immediately. All those things, if we do them, they'll bring hope to people and we'll see democracy flourishing. And we need business to do those kinds of things. I mean, I don't want to sell what I've done, but as a statistician general of South Africa, now I can actually predict at lower levels of geography what is happening. I can measure impact at the lowest level of geography, 200 households in Gauteng. And that's what we need. We need to lay down that kind of information brought to almost real time from 2022 census, fertilized by the surveys that STSA does, because that longitudinal surveys from 1996 to 2022 is a very rich mesh, very, very rich mesh that we have to make use of in order to understand where we are going as a country.
So, Dr. Lehota, I also want to touch on that issue of inclusion that was raised, because there are ways in which we make invisible marginalized groups in our society simply because we say nothing about them in our policy. And so where there's nothing said, it is implied that there's nothing planned. Speak to me about that, because in this plan as it is, do you think that there are specific ways in which those that are living with disability are actually going to be empowered? We know what the national policy is, right? We know the targets that are set. I think it's sitting between 5-6%. I'm in a room with government officials, so I know I stand under serious correction there. But even on those very low targets, we are not doing well at all. How do we change that?
That's why I'm so passionate about what, and there's a lot of background on what I did and came to these kinds of observations. That this plan, I can log it on, and then I'll see how it manifests in Zone 2 in Soshanguve. One of the things that we have to do is to link industrialization to what happens on the ground. The extractive industries like mining, extractive industries like manufacturing in South Africa, that doesn't give concern to the schools that are just a kilometer away from where they manufacture. We need a foundry. Every school in South Africa must be a foundry, because the crisis we face needs that kind of action. And these tools I've developed suggest the pathway to those things, and they link up with these development programs. So when I say a few beautiful words about this, it's because I know where we were before. We ignored scenarios. Once we ignore scenarios, we don't have railguards that guide you to the right things. We don't have scenarios as a government. We used to have them in even the Montflair scenarios, which created gear. They were followed by the future, the memories of the future, and the future we chose. Beyond that point in 2008, we never had scenarios. And that doesn't give line of sight for business to operate. So those are the tools that we have to bring together.
Okay. I think to touch on the question of inclusion, this is why the Gauteng Youth Advisory Panel exists, from civil society, young people who are marginalized, women, disabilities. And this is why it's important to invest in the panel, to resource it, to ensure that we hold the government accountable in terms of including people who are marginalized in rooms like this. So if the work that we do is seen and is talked about more, then it would help us also hold government accountable.
Okay, Neil?
Sure, my boss. So just to go a step back, the reason why I took on the role was exactly because of MMC Sarah's response at her economic investment opportunity, and she spoke on stage, and afterwards I went and checked and I said, is she really telling the truth? Is she really doing what she's saying? And everybody kept coming back and saying to me, it's real. What Tshwane doing is real. And what they've gone and done is that they've said, if we don't look after our biggest companies, nobody else can thrive in this space. So they went and identified their top 200 companies, and then they created a mechanism to fast track understanding their needs and what needs to be done. Last week I was in a meeting with an exceptionally important company that can really make a change in the continent. And the mayor looked the guy in the eye and said, if you don't tell me what I need to do in our city, how do you expect me to help you? And that was a direct conversation with such an important anchor tenant. And I think the mayor of Tshwane, she's brave and she's young. And that makes me excited because that brings longevity into the system. And she's starting to talk to business and saying, if you don't tell me what's broken, if you're not telling me what's right, but you also need to tell me what we're doing right so we know where to focus our time. And they are putting focus on business because they know if they don't make business thrive, nothing else can find its space. And that's what's so important. And, I've spoken to, I know Johannesburg well, and I know the western districts of the province well. I don't know the east and the south well. But there are hard-working people that work inside these structures that want to do it. But business needs to come and stand up. To speak to that gentleman about water, last night I put a challenge to the team about creating a pilot, and there's an area in the city where 4,000 people jobs are at risk. And water happens to be the issue. And I said, can we not take the action lab and do a real-time proof of concept? You know, somebody replied to me at 10:10 last night and 3:03 this morning.
Sure.
That's how the province is working. And I can tell you that's how the cities are working. To come back to the question that both you said, somebody needs to call me out next week, Friday, and ask me what has Saki done about this. You're working with a young entrepreneur that's going to be speaking in the United Nations about a platform. He's got the Minister of Economic Small Business, the Minister of Small Business on board. He's got the AU on board. He's about to speak at the UN about a platform that's designed for young people to understand what they need to do and to give them business language to go and get funding. And we're using AI. We're using exciting technology. We're consuming data. Doctor, hopefully we will be able to get your data and put it in there. It's happening. And I can tell you this plan has come along at the right time. The world's looking for winners. I speak to many ambassadors, so do you. And what do they all say? Why is South Africa so quiet? Why aren't you doing that? I spoke to an ambassador the other day and he says, I know why South Africa's in trouble with the US, because South Africa sticks to its contracts and it's got a SADC contract. And the US is asking South Africa to break that contract and South Africa won't do that. How powerful is a country when they will stick to their agreements? And that's what we need to realize. We are an amazing country. We've got a really good legal system.
All right.
We are a good country and we're about to unlock the youth.
Prof, let me give you a chance to come in.
The infrastructure and the institutions on which we try and lay all of these efforts has to be strong. And we cannot emphasize that enough. If you have a weak foundation, the best laid plans will fail. And so, again, that is something we all work towards. That is something the plan actually emphasizes a lot. A lot of these pillars you think of foundational things. And there's lots of detail underneath it, right? But our institutions, our infrastructure has to be in place. And so, in a sense, then the sequencing of our plan matters a lot. You can try a plan, and if you try it when other things are not in place, it's going to fail, and it's going to make that plan look bad, right? So I want to encourage all of us to pay attention to those details. Pay attention to, are the right things in place when we are trying something? If it's not, unlock those bottlenecks, get it right. Let me leave it there.
All right. Let me come then to the floor to give a final opportunity to respond for this panel discussion. MEC Maile?
As the Gauteng government, and we value the views of different stakeholders. And so it's not by accident that in that panel you have no one from Gauteng government. So it's by design. And even the program, how it was designed, we just set the tone and we give you, this is our plan, and then you critique the plan. We have had roundtable discussions before this launch. We have had, I think, 11 sectors already, and I think this afternoon we will have the automotive sector. Last year we had a investment conference. We had pledges of about 312 billion. When you look at this plan, the work we did was telling us that if you were to invest about 301 billion into the Gauteng economy, the economy will grow the certain percentage, I forgot, and create a certain number of jobs and all that. So what it means is that if we had converted all those pledges, we will be able to achieve that target. So, and in fact, the prof there, he did not say he's humbled. There's work that he's doing with us to do the economic modeling of this. So we're not leaving anything to chance. And I know sometimes people will say, no, but you're planning a lot and all that. But you can't implement if you don't have a clear vision and understanding of what is the problem and what needs to be done. So engagement, it's constant. And theorizing and understanding what we are dealing with will be constant work that we are doing. So, and that's why, for instance, when you don't see the MEC or the Premier at an event with the embassy, it doesn't mean Gauteng is not there. I'm not sure if there's any province that speaks to the international community like we do here in Gauteng. Because we have an appreciation that Gauteng is the host of different embassies. I mean, in Tshwane, you've got embassies. In Johannesburg, you've got consul generals and all that. But I don't think the intention is to defend ourselves. But we take the criticism that perhaps you are not visible enough, perhaps you are not saying a lot about these issues and all that. But then, you know, the issue that Doctor is raising, the role of the national government. And you are right, because there are certain things that we will not do if national government does not come to the party. If you want to reindustrialize and bolster the productive capacity of the economy, there are certain things like energy, which is a national competence. If you are not, national is not able to deal with that, it doesn't matter how much commitment you have. You will not achieve those. Tariff setting, and you can go on and all that. The posture we've taken is that there are things that are within our control and within our power. So let's start with those, do them right, before you even complain with national and all that. I'm finishing now, so that I'm not giving you another speech. But I thought there are very, very important issues that are being raised, and I don't want to get to that, including the issues of vulnerable groups and all that. We take that, and I can go in detail about the work we are doing with every sector. And it's actually strange that we don't have other groups. And I think we'll have to check what is the problem. It's not because we don't value vulnerable groups. In the budget speech that we presented, the Disability Association business people were part of our special guests because of that work we're doing, but we're not saying that's all. The issue of big business And I would want us to have that discussion some other day. That's very important because, by the way, those pledges I'm talking about is from big business, not small business. And it's businesses from the country, businesses from the US, businesses from all over the world, big businesses. But they don't come to sessions like these. The question is why? But there's an issue, and I think that's why Kathy wanted me to respond specifically about government. I mean, what caliber of government you want? That's a question you must answer as a voter. What caliber what kind of government do you want? Do you want a government that has a vision, the government that is agile, that is responsive, a government that can take it? That's the kind of government everyone will say you want and all that. You need to answer that. But you know, when you're dealing with the issue of the water, I was speaking to the MMC, and this is my last point, just yesterday, of finance in Johannesburg, because I saw on the weekend they got an approval, they get a loan from a German company or something, about 3.5 billion to fix energy in the city. And I said to her, you know what, it's good, there's a need for that. But if you are going to, unless you change the model of how you implement, you are going to have the problems recurring. Because if you take the 3.5 billion and give it to City Power, which has a deficit of 18 billion, it doesn't make sense. That money is not going to go to where it's supposed to go. If the fact that you must still fix the City Power, and we can talk about that. But if you say to the private sector, we've got a problem on energy or on water, and we need water treatment plants, we need this and that and all that, but we don't have money now. So we want you as the private sector, and this is the Gauteng model, by the way. When we built Gauteng, we spent 26 billion, and we were criticized at the time as a elite project, all sorts of that. And if you look at the economic benefits and spin-offs of Gauteng, even as we speak now. So we spent 26 billion 15 years, 20 years back. As we speak now, the asset we own, is between 56 billion rand. We've spent 26 billion. We've got this asset. So I'm saying to the MMC, why don't you rather say to the market, this is the problem, and our problem needs 20 billion. Get the 20 billion, we don't have it today. We fix all water problems in Johannesburg, treatment, everything. Potholes, we fix all of them. And by the way, the borrowing ratio of Johannesburg is very ratio to debt. They can still borrow because when you look at it, they are very far and all that. So in answering your question, I think we need a different implementation model, because this thing that we're going to issue a tender, give it to doctor, and then the price is inflated and all these other issues. So in short, we need a different implementation model, and I think we can solve most of these problems. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, MEC Maile, for that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it officially brings us to the end of our panel discussion. We're out of time.